5 years from now, if you want to build a new building, it's going to be a prompt where you're going to be able to put in your address, style of construction, and use case that you're building. You're going to get a full set of working construction documents.
A study showed 45% of construction organizations report zero AI implementation. Only 1.5% use AI across multiple processes.
We had universities did some independent peer-reviewed studies and show that Togal was 4x more productive and 98+%, while human accuracy is around 57%.
You're a construction leader, CPA, congressman, nonprofit leader, tech founder, EVP. What would you say you wish you knew when you were 19 starting out on this journey? Hello and welcome back to the Human Side of Construction podcast, where we provide construction leaders insights they need to improve the industry and the great people in it. My name is Angelo, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Mr. Patrick Murphy, who's an all-around great human being and a talented and extremely diverse individual. So in addition to being an executive vice president at Florida's largest general contractor, Patrick is also a founder and CEO of a tech company, Togal.AI, a congressman. I think you have an accountant background as well, and you have a six-pack. So I would love to hear all your secrets. I appreciate you joining and really looking forward to this conversation.
Great to be on the show and looking forward to it.
You started estimating from a very young age. You learned from your grandfather. You're in a fourth generation company now. When you started, it was on printed plans and a scale ruler, which some people might be able to relate to. And you also started as a day laborer at the age of 19. So, what did growing up inside a construction company, especially a family-oriented one, teach you about people that you didn't have an experience to learn elsewhere?
Yeah, great question. I've still got the scale ruler right next to me. Yeah,
Nice.
Everyone in my family's got scale rulers and trace paper and highlighters and pencils ready to go. So, look, I think growing up in a construction family, you learn that this industry is the ultimate truth teller in many ways. You're learning about hard work. You're learning, who shows up, who doesn't, who can you count on. Things get a little tough because there's nowhere to hide. All right, everything gets exposed pretty quickly in construction. I'd say it also taught respect. Not that you learn that at home, of course, but in a work sense. Those really doing the work, putting the hours in when you're working as a day laborer, side by side with people busting their butts 5-6 days a week, tough hours, tough conditions in the sun in South Florida, in the humidity. Leadership isn't just what the boss is saying. It's how they act when things go sideways and when times are really tough. How do they treat? So those are lessons that you take with you the rest of your life.
That's very interesting. And I think coming from an owner's perspective too, but still working on with boots on the ground, it gives you a real appreciation for the work that takes place and the care that goes into watching out for people and giving them the tools they need to be successful, which ultimately is what leadership is about. So just going on the career arc a little bit. So we touched on it. So you started as a young age working in the family business. Then you kind of took the hero's journey and you went on your own and you tried to find a different path. I guess you did a little bit of time at Deloitte as an auditor, found your way into Congress, and then you ultimately came back into construction. That's obviously the abridged version. But a lot of people start in this industry and they never leave. So maybe share a little bit about, your experience, why you ventured off, and really why you gravitated back into the industry after all those neat different experiences.
Number one, I'd say I was very lucky and in many ways to be, born into a family construction business where my dad started the business and was always the type that said, to myself and brothers, follow your heart, right? If you want to be an astronaut, if you want to be a painter, our grandfather was a painter, if you want to be in construction, whatever it is, work hard at it, be the hardest working person in that field and you will succeed and you'll be happy, more importantly. And no matter what it is, if you're not happy, you're not going to be successful and your family's not happy. And so in college, I was doing finance and accounting. I wasn't sure exactly what direction I wanted to go, but ultimately, said, gosh, the family business hopefully is going to be there for some time. Why don't I go sort of own my own stripes, get out on my own, maybe learn something a little bit different than the way we do things, and then be able to bring that back. If that's the decision I wanted to make, I would come back maybe in a stronger position. So decided to pursue an accounting, background career. I got my CPA license and decided to work at Deloitte, as you mentioned, one of the big four, and really wanted to travel the world. So when I started at Deloitte, it was like 2007. I was going to move to London or Hong Kong and, travel and learn about, businesses and the way the rest of the world operates, because I only knew our family business. But then, of course, 2008 hit, and it was much tougher to travel and work abroad. So ended up staying in South Florida at Deloitte, and Lennar was one of the biggest clients accounts that I was on. So that was a great experience. The nation's largest home builders, right? Seeing how they do things. And then into public service, because ultimately I just got frustrated the way I thought our government was operating, seeing it first, he had to do with Sarbanes-Oxley, and as a public auditor, and then doing some cleanup work after the BP oil spill. I saw firsthand government's involvement in all of our lives, but especially our business side. And I just felt we could do better. And I was frustrated. So one of my best friends challenged me. He said, "Who the hell are you to complain? Do something about it." I said, "Okay." That's all it took really to get involved. My dad, my family was supportive of that, and they might have thought I was crazy, but said, "Hey, if that's what you want to do, we got your back. Let's go do it." So blessed to have a great supportive family, and ultimately found my way back to construction, and, couldn't be more excited about it, because when you grow up in an industry, what it's the dinner time conversation. So it's sort of like osmosis, just absorbing, everything about the industry. And there's just so much opportunity, I think, to improve the industry. And there is tremendous complexity in construction, as anyone that's in it knows, and there's a lot of nuance in it. And I think with that comes opportunity with today's technology to improve it, and to make it more efficient, and potentially even help bring down some costs, so we can help the workforce housing crisis we have in our country, the affordability crisis we have in our country, through housing, and build better communities that we're all proud to live in. And I think technology in the next 5, 10 years is really going to change the way we build for the better.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a little bit. A couple of things that came to mind as you were talking there, just to pull out a couple threads. Like I had a similar experience, I didn't work in construction as a family business. My family was in the restaurant industry. So like a lot of Greek Canadians, a lot of people ended up in the restaurant industry. I don't know why. Maybe it was our love of food or whatever. But anyway, so I work started as a dishwasher when I was 12. I was cleaning grease traps and cleaning toilets, doing the dirty work and learning the hard things. And then I eventually found my way into construction. And what I found in a lot of people I've talked to and worked with and myself, it's almost like you end up in construction because you were meant to be there. You know what I mean? There's a certain type of personality, and I think it's in people's DNA. People who love to build stuff take honor in watching a project come to life, from paper to a building to people using it. That is, the essence of construction, and it's really important. So it's funny to hear you say that it kind of pulled you back. I think obviously a bit of nature and nurture there as well, because your family was always around it. But just the way you talk and your experience, you can tell you're passionate about it and you just like helping people. And at the end of the day, we're building infrastructure. We're helping the progress of humankind. I think that's what people need to remember about what we do. We're not just putting a bunch of steel and concrete together. We're shaping communities. We're shaping people's lives. We're building hospitals for people to go heal. We're building offices for people to go work. We're building rec centers for people to take their kids and have a good time. Like it's really important, noble stuff we do. So bringing that back, that's what's always kind of fueled me to work hard. But I want to pull at that thread a little bit, because a lot of what I hear from leaders these days about younger kids is they're lazy and they don't want to work, and they'll only spend a year or two here, and I don't want to train them because they're going to leave. What are your thoughts on that, or what have you seen in the industry when it comes to the younger generation and the kind of leadership style that they require?
I feel like every generation almost has the same conversation, where they look at the younger generation and they don't like the music, they listen to, or the cars they drive, or the clothes they wear, and their behavior or study skills. And it's changed, right? And yeah, it kind of speaks to other, maybe conversation here as we get to AI and all that. Change management is tough in many ways. And I think it's a misconception in many ways that the younger generation is lazy. Of course, there's examples of that in every generation. There's been lazy, yes, but ultimately, I think it's a misunderstanding that the younger generation really expects more and wants to be challenged more. They've been exposed to way more, way faster than any previous generation, and that's going to continue to be true. And as the price of intelligence moves toward zero, because we've all got these things in our pocket, and large language models that are basically learning the intelligence of the world, and developing super intelligence, we're going to continue to be exposed to way more information and knowledge than we've ever had possible. The world is getting flatter and flatter. And with that comes, I think, a really a demand or requirement for business owners and leaders to expect more from new hires. And I think what we would have expected from just say a 22-year-old that was starting in our business as a junior member, employee, we should almost be treating them like a 30-year-old, middle, a little bit more middle management, because they've been exposed to more and we should be requiring more, and they're going to do better in that role because they can solve the problems faster than probably my generation or, parents. And I think that's the misconception is you put them in a lazy job where there's not a lot of mental stimulation and doing some mundane work, they're going to treat it like that.
Yeah.
So that's the problem there. How do we elevate the workforce and really stimulate them, enable them to use, more tools, whether that's AI, whether that's, robotics, whether that's drones, depending on the industry, what they're doing.
I think that's spot on, and I've always thought it took me a little bit to come to this conclusion because it's not really an easy problem to solve, but it comes down to communication styles, how people it's not just the words you say, it's how you say it, the mediums of communication, the type of information that they're dealing with, the type of challenges. Like you said, I think a lot of people coming in traditional construction culture where things are kind of slow and still paper-based in a lot of regards, they're walking in being like, I was told construction was this cool thing to get into, and you guys are still living in the dinosaur age. So they're not challenged. And so that's one piece. Another piece is I think they're younger people, at least I remember, I think we're around the same age. I'm 42 this year as well. And when I started, I knew I wanted to be a vice president one day. I knew I wanted to be in senior leadership, but I was a little more realistic about it. I knew it was going to take time. Now, even people I talk to, coming in as a coordinator, where do you want to be in 5 years? Oh, director or VP. I'm like, well, that's great to want that, but it takes time. And not saying it's not an intelligence thing, but it just takes time to get to those levels. But they need to see the path. They need to know the steps. They want to be told, okay, this is what you can do. This is how you get there. And if you don't tell them, somebody else is, and they're going to go elsewhere. That's what I found. Going back to the technology piece, because that's a really important part and what I want to talk on for the next few minutes. When we look at productivity in construction, there's different studies out there, but in terms of labor productivity, it's basically the same in construction as it was 20 years ago. Pre-construction is a huge, and it's growing, it's a huge piece of overhead costs for contractors. As project models get more into design build, design assist, progressive design build, it's more labor heavy on the front end, which it should be, because that's where the planning that you can save a lot of money. But that presents other challenges because a lot of companies aren't set up for that or don't understand those processes. So when you came back to Coastal after your time at Congress, one thing I noticed is you noted that there was so much time spent in the office on the estimating side, basically coloring boxes, clicking with the little clickers, maybe using the little electronic counter. So what was the moment for you where you kind of realized that this was an issue? And not only was it an issue, but we had to do something about it, and kind of walk me through that process.
Yeah. So I'd say coming back into family construction business that we've been blessed to be in a great market in Florida and busy and continue to grow with incredibly smart people working in. Um, that was exciting, but the frustrating part was that generally the processes were all basically the same. It was all basically the same tech stack, the same, basic workflows. And when I was in Congress, I was the youngest member at the time. And I was, I guess, 29 or so. And I was spending a lot of time thinking about the future of work from a government perspective, how our country should be prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. And because of that, I got exposed back in 2013, 14, 15 to AI and crypto and, some of the new technologies that were in their early days. And so I had this sort of in the back of my head of this unbelievable change that was happening in our economy, this technological revolution we're living in, and now trying to make sense of that in this construction, industry. So was thinking about, well, how do we best, bring change about? So went to our financial side with our CFO. And so the biggest piece of overhead the business was estimating. As you kind of peel back the onion on that, saw that takeoffs were basically the number one times taking 50 to 60% of our team's time. And that was frustrating because saw these incredibly smart people spending half their time doing manual takeoffs, basically the same way I did with my grandfather 27 years ago. I know maybe it was with a mouse instead of a ruler, but basically the same work. And was really identified not a people problem, it's a tools problem, right? And you can't unsee that. And so did some research and basically saw that there was no AI even being thought of. So we said, holy cow, like how often in life that you first should come up with an idea? This is awesome, right? So started filing some IP, started hiring an AI team to start developing the foundational models and machine vision models to make blueprints like you would teach a human, a 5 or 6 year old or whatever. Hey, this is a sink, not a toilet. Here's why, right? And you label it and you correct it and you keep training it and training it. And tens and now hundreds of thousands, millions of plans that this machine vision model has been trained on. So it's now more accurate than a human, right? But it takes a lot of training and time. So, originally we were thinking about, gosh, are we just going to keep this to coastal and just use this to improve our workflow, speed up estimates, get bids out the door faster, let our humans focus on what they really enjoy. Like our estimators love value engineering and the sculpting and the negotiation with the subs and the back and forth and the nuance of each job. Uh, Not coloring like
Yeah.
county toilets. That's not when they sign up for it. So how do we empower them to do that work? Because ultimately that makes them happier and helps Coastal win more work. And then it was sort of an easy decision. Well, why keep this to Coastal? Every contractor in the world has to do a takeoff to some degree, right? So let's open this up to everyone and make the industry more efficient.
Oh, that's awesome. And a couple things there when it comes to IP. Obviously, there was IP involved in developing the software, but it's funny talking to different construction professionals. Everybody seems to be they keep their cards close to their chest when it comes to their internal processes on how to build a building. And it's always boggled my mind because like there's no secret sauce to pouring concrete or or reviewing a steel coordination drawing. Like we're all so I don't mean that to dumb it down and say, but we're all making the same mistakes, Patrick, is where I'm going. So if we open source some of this info and provide and work together more than against each other, it's going to be a competitive edge for everybody. Obviously, if you have some financials you're going to keep secret, or if you have some secret concrete mix that you work with, that's different. But in terms of the means and methods of building, I think it's beneficial to share it with the industry. So it's really neat that you built out this tool to essentially help people and give them time back. So a note on estimating too. I spent some time in estimating. I did 3 years. I managed an MEP estimating group here in Toronto, and I came from the project management background, right? So I was brought up thinking like, oh, you have to be very scrupulous with the estimate. And if the job went south, you got to check where the estimator missed. And it was always, it's a thankless job, buddy. It's like if the job does really well, the PM gets all the credit. If the job does poorly, they blame the estimate. And I think a lot of people in the industry think estimators are just sitting there in the dark, checking boxes and counting things. That's not estimating. That's takeoff, which is obviously an important part. But the art, that's the science of it. The art of it is conceptually building the project without any resources. You have to think, where am I going to set up the crane? How are we going to fit this in the room? What kind of area, lay down storage, logistics, scheduling there. And I think, I'm on my soapbox now. I don't think estimators get enough credit in that regard. Like, am I the only one that see it or because you've been on both sides,
Oh,
right?
thank you for saying this. I think you hit the nail in the head because it's a science and an art. But what we're really trying to tell our prospects and users is we're unlocking your ability to be creative and do what's really human, and that's the art part. And that's the harder part, and the part the computer really can't do nearly as well. The science part, the takeoff, but let the computer do that. They do, they do it instantly. That's the easy, part. Let's focus the human power on the challenging art, the imagination of this 2D set of schematic plans. You got to come up with a price written, by the end of the week. Like, holy cow, what a challenge and task
Yeah.
and fun, part of the job to think of the logistics and the manpower and the materials and maybe a better way to build that job from the, you know, 2D documents, a paper sketch that some architect gave you, right? And try to understand their vision and what they're really trying to say in that set of plans. And that's what the computer can't do, right? And that wisdom, I think that comes from time, as you said earlier, Angela, that's not just, you don't just get that in college. That's having a lot of that dats. And that's exactly what I think we're trying to do is unlock the art and the human component because that's what we have, for hopefully a few more decades. before AI takes it off.
Yeah. And that's where the competitive edge is, right? Because if everybody does a takeoff correctly and prices the job the same, there's no competitive edge. It's in that art piece where you're thinking about how you're actually going to build it, and you find maybe you uncover a problem. You can ask an RFI, and then you unearth it for everybody, and then all that type of stuff through the process. So let's talk a little bit more about Togal. So you built this in-house for Coastal. You decided, hey, this is bigger than Coastal. It helps us. We want to help the industry too. What did that journey look like? When was it? When did you kind of take it outside of the company? What was it like getting adoption from people? And maybe we start at, what does it actually do? Is it a takeoff tool, or like what extent does it help with pre-construction?
Yeah. So at its core, Togal is a takeoff tool. It's a web-based takeoff tool that has AI, but all the manual basic tools that you need to do a takeoff, whether you're a GC, a beater, NDP, concrete, you name it. We've got all the takeoff tools. Web-based, which is a huge benefit for those that aren't web-based because it unlocks collaboration, sharing. If someone's, out for the day or traveling, they can still access the plans. If you're the boss, you can see what your entire team is doing. Maybe someone's doing windows, someone else is doing, paint or drywall takeoff. As the boss, you can see all of that real time. And if someone's sick, you don't lose all that work, right? So all these benefits, uploading the plans, security, right? Labeling the plans, just all these little paper cuts that we have in construction, from document management, labeling plans, these little silly things that add up to hours and hours a week are now removed. You can do the manual takeoff, or you can use AI. Click a button, boom, you get all of your areas, you get your walls, your linear takeoffs, you get your baseboards, your trim, those kind of things, all of your counts. But again, there's still that human element, that art, where we are just speeding up. It's like a power tool, right? Sure, you can use a manual screwdriver, or you can use, something a bit faster in a power tool, and get the job done. Same in we tell all of our customers, you're the pilot, right? We're just a co-pilot, right? We're just speeding things up, helping you get to that finish line a little quicker. So again, you can go back to that art and, understand the software detail and maybe some MEP clash, and get to that RFI quicker, get to the value engineering, the scoping a bit quicker in the process. And let's shrink this pre-con, because, time is money, right? And they say, what, 20% or so of construction costs are in pre-con. If it goes right, if it goes wrong, to your point, it could be a much bigger number, and let's unlock that. So early on, we said, we just back and enacted math, and we said that if we got this to work, this back in 2019, this could save $1 million, maybe $2 million a year for Coastal. We said, that's a no-brainer. Let's
Mm.
invest in this. And as we started building it right away, we said, gosh, this is, you know, silly to keep just to our company. Sure, it may give us a leg up, but it's a big world. There's a lot of contractors that would benefit from this. And this company could be bigger than Coastal one day, and really help the industry. So it was a pretty quick and easy decision that we needed to spin this out and make sure it was a standalone company. And sure, Coastal would be a client, but there's tens or hundreds of thousands of potential clients out there that we could help serve. So easy decision. And that is really why we ended up raising money. We went to, friends and family, developers, and other contractors, people, architects in the industry that knew the problem, and they helped invest, helped us with data, and helped us make sure we were building a tool that was going to serve everybody, not just one.
Is it specific for certain type? Like, is it a GC tool? Can it be used for MEP? My background's mechanical, right? So I'm thinking fixture counts, equipment, things like that. Or is it limited to certain trades or companies, or size as
Sure,
well, like typical size of companies?
everything you do it on screen or blue beam or, any other sort of traditional takeoff tool, we do, right? All the functionality. I would, of course, argue that it's a 25-year newer interface, so the buttons are easier and it's faster, and there's just tools there that help improve the basic manual takeoff that can be used on every single trade. And we have clients across the spectrum, right, from civil, early, engineering through landscaping, everything in between. Now, the AI function are optimized for certain trade industries, GCs, definitely paint, drywall, carpentry, electric, plumbing, some mechanical. But, you know, in order to continue going deeper and deeper into each trade and optimizing the AI, we have a roadmap for that, and we'll continue to, invest in those trades and basically build different verticals to go deeper and deeper and trade and audit. Ultimately, try to automate as much of that manual work as possible. So again, estimator gets to the art side of things
Mhm.
faster.
The interesting point there, like I've been doing construction now 20 years, and I find that the more you know, the less you know, because the more you realize there is to know, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I could see that as being a challenge, especially when you're working with AI. Mind you, it's, the rate that technology is improving is increasing as well. But the deeper you get into specific subject matters, the more you realize that how complicated it is. But I'm hopeful, and I'm sure that with the use of technology and AI, it's going to help simplify things because we need it to with the the labor shortage. So on construction tech and AI adoption, a study showed 45% of construction organizations report zero AI implementation. Not a little bit, zero. Only 1.5% use AI across multiple processes. Meanwhile, 44% of firms plan to increase AI spending, and cost estimator employment is projected to decline 4%, I guess just because of atrophy or people retiring. So the gap between what people want and what they're actually doing is massive, and there's a huge amount of potential. Everybody's talking about AI in construction. Even myself now, I've delved into a little bit, but at first I thought everybody's talking about AI. It's like when BIM first came out, people would say, "Oh, I want a BIM project." It's like, well, that doesn't mean anything, guys, because what level of detail do you want? What's going to be modeled? Who's going to be involved? And I think largely from a leadership perspective, a lot of people at an executive level hear AI and they think, "Oh, we have to get this in our company." But they don't actually know how to do it. So obviously, a tool like Togal is something. What are some other ways you've seen AI being implemented? And also, why is it such a challenge in construction? Like, why are we so resistant to changing our ways, I guess?
It's like, I don't know if construction always resists change. I think they're really resisting the risk more than anything. Uh, and I think a lot of tech through the years hasn't respected how the industry works and the nuance that you were just alluding to, right? The more you know, the more you kind of realize that you don't know that much, right? And
Mm,
realize there is a lot of detail in it. And so you can't take some, Silicon Valley, you know, probably really smart person and just drop them into construction and think they're going to pick that up. And I think there's been a lot of tech that's just overlooked construction. Oh, you stack these blocks and they don't just sort of build themselves. It's the complete opposite. So I think on top of that, there was no tech that could affordably process the nuance in construction until AI.
mm,
That's built exactly for this indirectly. Now, the publicly available large language models aren't great at machine vision and reading plans. That's where we have really tried to differentiate ourselves, where we have now trained a proprietary machine vision model on millions and millions of label planes. And because of that, it has gotten very smart at reading blueprints and understanding what to read and what not to read, and a legend and a bubble, and what to ignore and what to read. And maybe what's really important for a plumber doesn't matter for the drywaller or, whatever trade, and that nuance. So, I think a framing of it for leaders out there is that the AI and technology should be really focused on replacing the repetitive tasks, the boring, mundane, right? Because the more low value tasks, but not the judgment, right? Not the relationships, not the experience and the wisdom that we were just talking about. And the goal isn't necessarily fewer people. The goal is, how do you better use your people? In fact, I think the first question you asked, Angelo, is those new and team members that you have, challenge them and unlock what they've learned through the years, and how they can apply technology to better use them and challenge what they've learned, not give them a takeoff and, hey, go count toilets for the next 2 years. Like that's not going to make them happy. It's not going to make you more money
mhm.
long term to the industry. So start off with the low value tasks. Human is in control. Yep, the AI is just a co-pilot. Or again, whatever tool it is, whether it's a drone, a robot, whatever, use it to empower your people, not to take their job.
I think it comes down to change management, right? Because people don't like change, Patrick. The older I've gotten, the more resistant I've become to change. but you get used to what you're comfortable with, right? And I'm looking at it from a perspective of, say, a 60 or 70-year-old construction company owner being like, I've made a good money doing it this way for the last decades. Why should I change? Because I'm checking out in a few years. And I don't mean they don't care about the future, especially if it's a family owned company, but their own personal bubble and their own comfort zone. I don't think anybody likes to go outside of it. I like being challenged in certain regards. I like trying new things and learning new things. But I always find myself, I have to say, oh, Angelo, you're reverting back to your old ways. You got to stay outside, and because that's where you learn, that's where you grow. And what I'm seeing happening, and maybe it's a generational thing, maybe it's driven by technology, maybe it's both. But the change is coming, Patrick. The change is happening, and leaders and companies can adopt to the change and try and get ahead of it, or they can be forced into it and essentially backed into a corner. And if you're in the latter position, your options are extremely limited. So it's going to be uncomfortable. And this is what I tell people. It's going to be uncomfortable. Change is scary because you don't know. There's unknown involved. But, there's risk in not acting. So one question that I always come back to too is, oh, how can I trust that AI is not going to make the wrong decision or make a mistake? How can you trust your people aren't going to make the wrong, you know what I mean? People make mistakes. So I'm sure there's an accuracy level, and you can probably share what the accuracy level is for a tool like Togal. I guarantee you, without knowing the numbers, it's more accurate than a human being. Tell me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely right. We had a couple different universities did some independent studies, peer-reviewed studies, and showed on their own that Togal was 4x more productive and 98+% accurate, while human accuracy is around 97%. And anyone that's done takeoffs, on the same job for a week would tell you, you start to, just go through columns and corners, and you're just trying to get it done. It just becomes boring. We're going down to the pixel level, right? And really, really nuanced, more detailed than any human's ever going to be. You're not zooming in that precise every single corner. Now, look, is AI perfect? Of course not. But to your point, humans aren't either. So again, the human's in control. The human is the pilot, right? We're the autopilot speeding you up. You're still going to look at every sheet. You're still going to look at our takeoff, the segmentation, but you're now going to spend your time on the hard part and really imagining this job in 3D and go into the cuts and the sections and seeing how it lines up and looking for maybe an error, that was there. So they need some clarification. You're going to spend your time looking at maybe better material choices to make this job work, doing research on a better way to do it, some value engineering, right? Those are the fun parts, the engineering, imagination, parts that go into this. As we know, as estimators, so much of our time is early on in that schematic DB phase, right? It's not like, well, I'll get 100% dim documents that are ready to be built and go to permit. Like, by the time you pick that, the job's been won. It's been priced, right? We're really early on these preliminary documents. So there is a lot of art and imagination that goes into it. So, I think AI definitely has its bounds for now, and humans that use AI are going to go way further. If someone like you hiring people, I would take someone that's AI proficient any day of the week over just a good degree or something.
AI and the ability to adopt a change that comes with it, right? Because it's such a moving target. I found even every day you read the news and there's a new development, and the models are continually being updated, and it's really exciting time. So I think it was on LinkedIn where you said something to the effect, everyone keeps asking if AI is going to replace people, but the better question is replace doing what? And I think that's a powerful reframe. So we kind of touched on, what the AI and technology can help with. Let's take a minute and say where it's going. Like, do you think there's areas that AI should not broach in on? Like when we get into the art side of things with the conceptual and that building, do you think that AI might creep into that? Or should there be a boundary where we say, hey, you know what? AI cannot replace that. We shouldn't even bother.
Right now, I think AI should be replacing repetitive low value tasks, right? Like we said, not the judgment, the relationship, those kind of things. I think it's hard to put downs on what's going to happen. I think we all, as industry leaders, should be embracing the possible with AI, because I think it's going to unlock productivity, and I think it's going to unlock actually a lot more work for all of us. If you're familiar with Jevons paradox, that basically says as a resource becomes more abundant and therefore less expensive. It's going to be more, not less.
Mm.
Think of steam engines, electricity, and compute. The classic example, people, when 18 came out, people already said, gosh, there'd be no bank tellers. Well, there's more bank tellers today than ever was, but because the price came down so much, and now there's banks on every street corner, and three on a street corner, right? When you expand a road, is it less traffic or more? It's usually more traffic on that road after you expand it because more people go to it, right? And start using it on the freeway. So, same idea in tech as we start make it less expensive and more efficient. I would expect there to be more construction. We have a shortage, they say, of around 5 to 6 million housing units in our country, and that number is growing every year. We cannot keep up with demand. We need to solve that problem. Like, that means a lot of construction for all of us in the industry. And I think we should be, in many ways, embracing this. And to think, toward the future a little bit, Angelo, I believe in 5 years from now, if you want to build a new building, it's going to be a prompt where you're going to be able to put in your address, budget, style of construction, and use case that you're building. And you're going to get a full set of working construction documents. And if you think about it, like this, and break it down trade by trade, there's not an infinite amount of drywall assemblies or an infinite amount of way to install a toilet or a sink, not an infinite amount of ways to run that mechanical system or AC. Right? There's rules around all of this. There's some geographical parameters and norms that we use. There's, certain constraints that we all have. But if you look at single family homes in South Florida, there's a way you install drywall. It's different than Phoenix or Seattle or New York. But generally in that area, there's a couple ways to do it. And with data, and now our data set being tens and tens of millions of examples of plans, all of a sudden the AI database becomes stronger than most engineers because it can remember those 20 or 50 or whatever 100 million different samples of plans it's seen, and now start to predict the most efficient layout for a building, most efficient plumbing layout or engineering, of whatever it might be, and start to do some of the basic math that would go into how much steel is needed in a column because it's so often. And now let the engineer focus on how to get rid of the transfer slab, right? How can we re-engineer something and just remove that entirely? The AI does the basic math and sure what's needed, but again, unlock the art of engineering or the art of architecture, right? Architectural artists at the end of the day, let's enable them to focus on that and designing communities and buildings that are livable and walkable and more green, things that we're proud of. And unfortunately, I think so much of what's built today is built to performance.
Yeah.
And we're told, hey, here's the budget, here's the schedule, work backwards and figure it out. Right? I think what was old should be new again, where there was tremendous pride in architects' buildings that were built in the quality and going to last a generation, and materials and skills and folks that work with their hands, that carpentry, right? That I think makes many cities and buildings in Europe, for example, so appealing to us, is that nuance and finer detail that I think a lot of architecture and construction in the last couple of decades has been lost because we've been building to performance.
We
And I hope
yeah.
we can change that trajectory with AI and bring us back to the quality and skill. And again, with that abundance thesis of Jevons paradox, it's going to actually bring more jobs to the industry.
So you hit a bit of a chord there, and I got tingles, Patrick. So let's go on that for a little bit. We mentioned before there's a lot of pride and honor in what we do, right? In shaping communities and doing that. And I got into construction and I fell in love with it because I like building cool stuff and meeting nice people. Okay. But what I've found is it seems like we're getting more and more transactional. Like you said, the goal of a project now for especially bigger companies is to fulfill the minimal obligations of your contract with the least amount of resources to increase shareholder equity. People didn't get into the industry to do that shit. And they got into the industry to build stuff. They got it because they were passionate about design. And then you get caught in the mundane and the transactional nature. So I'm on board 100,000%. Let's bring it back to first principles and what really matters. Yes, it's important. Businesses exist to make money. I get it. But what we're talking about is more in alignment with what I think, going back to the younger generation. I think that's what people are looking for. Younger generations, they're looking more for purpose than a paycheck. And the way the industry is set up now with all these transactions and Oh, you just meet your scope, schedule, and budget. That's all you look at. Don't worry about that guy. Just focus on your own. That's not the right thing. But maybe I'm too touchy-feely. I don't know.
And I'm not even getting carried away with legal here, but so much of the work for so many construction teams is CYA, right?
Mm,
And making sure that you're not going to get sued, or if you are, everything documented and put in the right spot. And, whatever percentage of time is on that, and you're not building, right? Like people are because they want to build, they want that tangible asset. They want to see that progress every day. Not be managing spreadsheets and legal liability. And again, I hopeful that AI, obviously there's challenges with it. It's not perfect, but I do believe it will automate documentation, for example, right? Cameras on hard hats, cameras, mounted throughout the job, drones, robots, eventually on job site, they're going to be documenting everything that's happening and showing, right, ultimately how things were installed and help create that sort of blockchain of how a building was put together. So we're not manually doing it.
mm,
That enables the builders, right? And
right.
get back to what really. So I think you're spot on.
No, that's amazing. I'm glad you brought that up. So going back to something we mentioned, I'm sure we'll stick with estimators for now, but there's other people in the industry too, but there's say estimators. Hearing this conversation, hearing Patrick say the capabilities of Togal, how it's going to essentially do their job faster and cheaper. I think there's a lot of anxiety around that. And we already touched on the fact that it's not going to replace people. So, but like, what would you say to somebody hearing that might be experiencing a little bit of anxiety? Like, what's some advice we can give people on what they can do to adapt and stay ahead of this and stay relevant, essentially?
I would argue that estimators are about to become more valuable than ever. And I would say that for basically any role in construction, we have a graying, problem right now. I forgot the exact ratio, but I think it's something for like every four folks retiring construction, like one new person entering it.
Mm,
Uh, Especially as you start looking at skilled trades, the electrician, plumbers, et cetera. And so, as an estimator, if you look at your job as in coloring or counting, then sure, that's a risk. But if your job and value is thinking and problem solving, really understanding the job, the full scope of it, then you're about to become more important than ever because now that mundane is going to be taken care of for you. And now you can really focus on that problem solving, the bigger picture of the job, where the real risk is that could bankrupt your company or help you make another 10 or 20% on a job because you found a way to win the job, you found a way to value engineer it, you found a better material, maybe a better sub to work with. And that's the reward side of it that I think estimators often don't get enough credit for,
mm.
because they don't have enough time to focus on that because they're buried in takeoffs in some of the legality, right? These large language models are great at reading books and understanding all the documentation. Please let them focus on that, right? We now Total is great at doing takeoff. Let it do that. Shift the responsibility to those more human tasks. You're going to make more money than ever because you're more valuable. And your salary based on your productivity, right? Technology and AI specifically is making you more productive. So basically, by definition, by embracing technology, using more of it, you're more productive, which means you're going to get paid more, right? So I would highly recommend to folks out there to embrace these tools, learn them, become very proficient in AI. And how do you incorporate that into your workflow to make yourself more efficient? I tell our team all the time, if you can find a way to replace your job with a tool, you're not getting fired. You're getting a promotion and a raise because that's the kind of thing we need to make our company more efficient, right? And let's keep elevating what we're doing as humans, right, to the higher value tasks. And I think those closest to the problems are those best served to solve them. And I think we should be empowering, the younger generation or more junior people in many places to look for the tools and them out, integrate them, and they're not all going to work, but those that do, let's reward them.
Oh, I agree. Like, you have to empower the people actually doing the work and ask them questions and be curious. As people in leadership positions, I think a lot of people have the mentality like, I'm supposed to have all the answers. I can't tell them I don't know. But that is the most powerful question. I don't know. What do you think? Like, and sometimes I know the answer, but I'll still say that because it might change your perspective on things and it gives that person a voice as well. It makes them feel like they matter and they might have a really good idea. So I agree 100% with what you said. If I could just add one thing, embrace AI, right? Because it's going to help you. It's not going to replace you. But focus as well on the stuff that AI is not going to replace. You've mentioned it, the human element, relationships, talking to people, connecting with them, having coffee with them. And I think that might be a bit of a challenge. Predominantly, estimators are a little more introverted. They might not be as comfortable in social settings. But again, challenge yourself, get outside of that bubble, because one thing AI is not going to replace is like a human touch, right? So you've had a pretty incredible career. You've done a lot of different stuff, right? You're a construction leader, CPA, congressman, nonprofit leader, tech founder, EVP. I had to look at my notes because there's so many things. You're only 42, buddy. What would you say now, after all this experience and all you've accumulated? What's a couple things you wish you knew when you were 19 starting out on this journey?
I'd say no one has it entirely figured out. No one's, uh, 25 or 30 or 40 because I got all the answers. I know exactly the playbook, right? Everyone's learning and continuing to adapt. I think listening, what's the old saying? God gave you two ears and one mouth. Use them, accordingly. Um, I think all leaders and everyone should be open minded, especially in times like this and changing times. With that also comes response to it and adapting faster than ever, looking at what's happening in the, sort of the macro world and thinking about how it applies to your job, your career, your focus, your goals. Um, Not putting your ego or yourself first, right? Putting the outcome or the business or your family, whatever it is that drives you first, right? That's ultimately what matters. And as that succeeds, so will you. Um, More specifically, if I was looking back, if I was, graduating college, what would I, be doing different? Number one, AI proficiency, continue to learn and listen. There is a lot of wisdom out there, especially in construction. Listen to those that have been around the block and been working in construction for decades. Learn as much as you can from them because it's very valuable. Don't think you know everything, right? That's for sure. Your network is critical and important and unique to you. I wish I would have done a better job tracking my network, maintaining relationships. It's easier than ever today with AI and social media that didn't exist really when I was in college. So use that to your advantage, track the relationships, whatever phase of your career you're in. Take advantage of that. Tools like LinkedIn are powerful, especially if you're, more junior in your career. Use that to your advantage. Make sure you're documenting, your career, what you're doing. Always, I'd say, think about how you can help solve other people's problems, whether that's your boss or a colleague. People are going to recognize that you're stepping up to the plate. You don't be passive and wait for your boss to ask you to do something. Do it. You might see the problem before they do. Go ahead and solve the problem and bring those solutions to folks and think about where time is being wasted in a company in a role. A lot of senior management doesn't even know some of the inefficiencies that you might be dealing with. So identify that, come up with a solution, present it to your boss. They're going to see you as a leader right away.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think, construction projects, it's about solving a problem. An owner needs something, they want it, and then we provide the solution. And you take that down as a macro level, but you zoom in into individual careers. And I think that's very powerful. Be a problem solver, solve problems in, business life, relationships, everything. How can we learn more about Togal, Patrick, or get in touch with the team there? Where I'll put it in the show notes as well, but maybe just let people know quickly here.
Yeah, for sure. The website, www.togal.ai. It's TOGAL.ai. The name Togali means builder in Gaelic, the Irish language. I'm Irish.
Hmm.
And then the name I, so it was perfect. So yeah, check out Togal.ai. LinkedIn, social media. I'm Patrick Murphy, FL. Togal has a presence as well. Reach out, any place. Love to give a demo. Love to tell you more about it. How can help your company? There's some great new companies coming about right now, and those that adopt them. And I'm not just trying to give a commercial for Togal, but in the next 5 years, there's going to be a widening of those companies that are succeeding and growing faster than others, more rapidly than I think we've ever seen. So it's not too late, right? We're still in the early innings of this AI phase, but if you wait 2 or 3 years, I think they're getting hard to catch.
Oh, that's really valuable insights and specific to AI and career and everything, Patrick. I really appreciate your time. I thought you were Italian. I'm just joking. That's everybody in Canada in construction. But no, I really
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Thanks for joining, and looking forward to see where Togal takes the industry.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thanks everybody for listening. This has been the human side of construction. If you have a similar story, or you're a construction professional that wants to share how you're addressing these workforce labor challenges or AI and tech adoption, please reach out, Angelo at hsoc.one. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care.